So I'm always fascinated with this idea that purpose comes from pain. And what I find very interesting about your journey is that I could see why this purpose for you and helping people live, that's what you're doing, helping people live the day to day. Tell me if I'm off, but do you see how this connects so well with like your beginning and like I don't know if I'm going to make it. I don't know when I'm going to get sick and if I'm going to die. So I have to learn how to live today. And that's kind of what you're doing for these dentists. Is that fair? Does that sound accurate?
100%. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, that's exactly what it is. So I think if you've never had a near-death experience, for example, and it's crazy to me how many people who haven't really experienced that, or they weren't aware enough to turn it into something that was meaningful for them when it happened. You know, they just kind of let it slide. Okay, had a near-death experience, so I'm going to move back on like death is not real. And so, you know, and a lot of what happens with a lot of my clients is they come from crazy stories. You'll see where I have this common thing where they've come out of war zones, literally, and they've come to this country and they were sent alone as children to go make something for the family, and dentistry or doctors were the thing, you know, from certain countries, that was the thing. And so what happened is they came over here and they had two choices. It was go live on the streets and be addicted, or it was pick yourself up and go make something for the family. And so they did wire their brain on survival, right? And then in order to change that, you really have to rewire the brain, which takes a long time, and it takes a super level of consciousness about how you live day to day in order to start to reel it back in and then reconnect with your family, because these are people who met their families after they were already stuck on overdrive. Mm-hmm. And so now their families love them, they're impressed by them, but now they're pushing their families away because they never spend time with them. And I'll do these burnout prevention groups, and I'll be asked to come in and speak on self-care or whatever for groups of doctors. I mean, these are doctors, come on, you know, I'm not a doctor. And you would think that they would already have this figured out, but they literally, you know, get into their 60s or somewhere around there, and they say, you know, if I had it to do over again, I would never have done this. I have destroyed my relationships with my children. I've destroyed my relationships with my spouse. You know, I'm divorced now. You know, now I have back problems and constant pain, and I can't get my health back. You know, it's just crazy. And yet it's not necessary. And so I help them to take from where they're at and go ahead and find the good in that, right? And learn to live again. Or young people have the opportunity to do it differently.
How can you, so this brings me to this, which is like, how can we have both? Like, I don't think that, I don't see a reason why I can't build the huge business that I want and be an awesome father, awesome husband. The question I think then is how do you do both?
Yeah, I love that question. So, and I'm sure you've probably, you know, been experimenting with this already, but I 100% believe you can do both. And I look at people like Oprah and say, hey, I've got the same number of hours in the day. There's no reason. You know, I look at Tony Robbins and go, okay, if he can manage 56 or 65 businesses, I can, you know, I literally say that to myself, not to be arrogant, but the truth is, why can't I? And so, and still be a great mom and still, you know, take care of my husband. I believe you can do both. And I believe that really fundamentally, again, it's just being grounded in not forgetting that you have these things that have meaning that are not just the business. So we tend to get caught up. And so, you know, I'm a big fan of some of the philosophies that people like Tim Ferriss have, where, you know, short, fast goals like what you do, because we get bored and or we give ourselves too much time. And then what we do is we spend too much time doing things we could have done in 2 weeks. We take 6 months to do it. And that's why we waste time and we don't spend it with our family. So you do it and schedule block time, you know, drive, like do it, get on it because it matters that you get next week off with your kids, you know, like, so cram it in, go for it. Why not? Don't kill yourself. Don't hurt yourself doing it. But you know what I'm saying? Like, we have so much power in spurts. Why don't we use it? And then go and also have these incredible, meaningful times, or put it into your legacy or what you want to give back to the world or the impact you want to have, inspire other people, whatever it is.
Like, I remember, because it reminds me that I had a mentor when I first started. It was the first consultant that I met, and he inspired me to be a consultant. And he came into my company, And I remember him saying that he does like $1 million deals, and it blew me away. I was like, that's a thing? Like, you could do that? And by the way, the stuff that he was teaching was all based on, I had a background in sports, and it was all about how you can be a coach, and like for your people, and how everyone has a coach. And I was like, holy shit, I could do this. And anyway, I remember talking to him because he had found out that I was working my ass off. I was super young. I was like 25. I was it didn't matter. I was like pretty high up in the company, and I was working a lot. And he goes, Raylen, it's really awesome that you're working 60, 70 hours a week, but you can't do that forever. And he goes, people think that life is a marathon, and what I have found to be true is that life is a series of sprints followed by extreme rest. And ever since then, I started to do this thing where, again, with help from my my boss at the time, because I do have a very addictive personality, and I can tend to be a workaholic, that I would, and I do this now, and as an entrepreneur, is I'll work my ass off. Like, I literally try to burn myself out, but then I'll take a week and I'm gone. You can't reach me. You can't call me. Like, me and my wife, we're off. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to work for me. So I'm very aligned with the idea of like, let's sprint. Let's go as hard as we can. And then let's relax. Like, when I mean relax, I mean, Julianne, I'm dead. Like, I don't even exist. You know what I mean?
I'm very similar. Okay. I'm not going to lie. I have a very similar, and not everybody's space. Some people are very, they're all about pacing it. I just remember even in high school, I didn't ever want to run long periods. I would sprint. Yes. I would be the sprinter. And so it's funny that you said that, because now I'm thinking back on it going, oh yeah, that was me. Sprint it out and then just go chill, whatever.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. And it's not, I think everybody's a little bit different, right? But I think when you have true meaning, and you have things that you're really looking forward to, and part of that can be rest, part of it can be that downtime, and part of it can be the time that comes after hitting those pinnacles, right? It's when people think that those pinnacles are sustainable, or that you can sprint the whole time, that's when it becomes a problem. And that's what you see a lot of times in dentistry, is people continue to sprint, and they're hurting themselves, and they know they are, and yet they don't know what to do to stop, because they also wear this title that makes everybody depend on them in their mind. And what they're just needing to learn is that they can be imperfect. And what people really love is actually the part that is imperfect. It's the part that is human. And so you can have all of that great stuff, but if you don't have the human side, and you don't let people see you vulnerable, then what the hell's the point? You're not going to inspire anybody. Nobody's inspired by people who are always at the top. They're inspired by people who are at the top, who started somewhere else or fumbled at some point along the path, and then share how they fixed it or how they changed it.
Well, you said it perfectly at the beginning, right? Like, start anywhere. And sometimes, like, the thought process of, okay, I'm gonna carve out my entire life, right? My entire business the next 10 years. It's arguably, and I want to hear your take on this too, I'm a big fan of the Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold, which is just simply to mean, like, write out what you see this could turn into. But where I usually leave off is I say, leave out the how, because you don't fucking know. Right? Random opportunities come to you that can literally be the thing that is going to elevate you to the next stage, but you deny it because it's not what you thought you would do. So, what is your take on, like, the whole idea of, like, well, you should set 10-year, 20-year goals for your life? I feel like you can't, because then you miss out on the really cool opportunities that you found, which is like, maybe I'll start a fucking musical.
Yeah, I know. And this is it. One of the things that it makes me think of when you said that just now is the idea. I've always loved the idea of calculated risks. So that's kind of like always been my how. It's just like, I think this is the way you pull this off. I think this is how you write a musical. I think this is how you sell tickets. Or even I think that this is what corporate people want to hear when I speak. And I always found that once you do it, that is where you realize that you were right on some of it and you were wrong on a lot of it. In fact, I'll never forget my friend Doug saying something to me, pretty successful entrepreneur. And so this musical I was doing, I had rewritten it 5 separate times over the course of 2 years. I just didn't like it. I'd take a song out, to put a new song in. And my friend Doug, when we were talking with a bunch of friends over beers one time, was kind of half making fun of me. He says, you know what I love about Stuart? He says, he's the only guy in theater who workshops a show and actually charges people why he does it. It's like, usually people go, they kind of get the kinks out, then they start charging. Yeah. I was like, screw this. I think that the first version is pretty damn good. It became very different than the fifth version, but people were still enjoying themselves. So no matter what your entrepreneurial idea is, you want to sell widgets, fine. Go out there and sell widgets for $1 a piece. And then guess what? As you sell that, you're going to start getting customer feedback. And they're going to say, oh, your widget would be better if you did it this way. Ah, that's a cool idea. You then make those changes. Now you're selling your widgets at $2 a piece. And so on and so forth. And so even right now, like, it's funny that you asked that question. Just 30 minutes ago, I was having a conversation with my life partner, who is also my business partner, about this new entrepreneurial idea that we want to create. It's an after-school program in New York City. And we're like, oh, man, I mean, we don't want to just go and do this and put all that effort into it and all that work and then find out it's not something that we really wanted to do. But then we said that, we started laughing, we started realizing there are so many businesses that I have started over the years that are now no longer businesses. And I mean, we're talking, they had dedicated websites, they had pay systems, they had infrastructure, they had employees. And then I just was like, yeah, it's not my jam anymore. Or I thought it was going to go one way and it didn't go that way. And so one of the things I would say to your listeners is, and your viewers, is to recognize that if you start something and it doesn't end up becoming like something that Microsoft comes along and buys off of you for $30 million one day, it's okay, because guess what? You learned a bunch of shit that doesn't work, and you're going to take it on to your next thing. And so, I mean, even just now, like my partner, her name's Marina. Her mother owns a very successful gymnastics club in Toronto, and I mean, it's a very interesting business model and one that can be quite lucrative. Well, the first thing she said was, she's like, I don't want to start something where we have to continuously deal with parents, because parents can be annoying. Yeah. And even though we're parents, we know how annoying we can be. And so she said, that's what scares me, watching my mother do it with her gymnastics club. But then I reframed it and I said, aha, see, take that as a blessing so that you know what you don't want. And as you build a business, build it so that you aren't the one dealing with the parents. Yeah. Don't see it as something that you have to. Just do it in a way that makes you so you don't have to. So it's like, you aren't the same person you were 10 years ago, and your business won't be either. So just start a business and be okay with it completely morphing into something else.
You know, I think that's a great point, because, again, letting go of the how, more and more I realize how important it is. Like, as long as you're within your purpose, the how can change, right? Like, you know, we started a podcast agency for coaches and consultants. If you would have told me, Stuart, 5 years ago, hey, you're gonna start let alone not even just a podcast agency, but like an agency period, I'd be like, what the fuck would I do that for? You know what I mean? Like, right. That doesn't make sense. I'm not gonna do that. But then, but it fell in line with the purpose, so it makes sense, and now I love it. Again, that's why I think you have to. I have a friend of mine, his name's Chris True. He's an improv coach, actually. But he coaches a lot of entrepreneurs, and he says it's important to hold your ideas with a tightly open fist. And so it's like, you know, at the end of the day, like, it's going to change. And instead of holding on and saying, no, it has to be this way. Well, that's why businesses, I don't think, work. It's just because you're too rigid, I think, in your approach. Like, not completely. To get weird, but like Bruce Lee, right? Be like water. Well, most of us are not.
Yeah. Well, I was going to offer my own weird example. You know, you can compare this to the dating world. I mean, how often do you meet or talk to a friend who's so frustrated that they can't meet Mr. or Mrs. Right? Yeah. And you ask them, well, what's the criteria? What's the approach that you're taking to meet people? And it's so rigid. They're like, I only go out on Mondays. I only go out for coffee, and I'll only go out with someone who looks like this. And I'm like, I just can't figure out why you're not meeting somebody. Yeah. Like, you open yourself up to a million possibilities, and guess what? You're going to have someone come into your life. And I think that that's a big mistake that as entrepreneurs that we make. You know, back to the musicals, and it was only just a small blip of my entrepreneurial career, but it does offer us an example of this where. One of the things that was kind of ironic was that I had such imposter syndrome in writing a musical, having come from a business background. Yeah. And so, but I'm hiring all these actors who all have like very interesting and respectful resumes. Some of them have been in some of the biggest musicals of in history. And so anytime they had an idea of something that they thought would be kind of cool to go into the musical, because I was so much of an imposter, I'm like, yeah, no, that's a great idea. Let's do it. To a certain extent, if I thought it was a horrible idea, I wouldn't take it. But when I would take these ideas it just kept making the show better and better and better. Yeah. So if I was rigid in that, no, I wrote the show, this is the way it has to look, well, we wouldn't have had the 4 or 5 year run that we did. But because I was willing to let the musical change and constantly become something different, it then became its own special thing. So yeah, if you want to start any kind of business or any kind of idea, or you want, even when you start writing a book, so many people out there who are watching this right now, I meet so many people who want to write a book, which is cool. You don't have to know the ending of the book before you start writing it. Just start writing it and let the one page turn into another.
Yeah, but also like you have this amazing ability to surrender, I think, to certain things that are coming your way, which again led to your speaking. So out of curiosity, what was like the first things you were talking about when you became a speaker? Like what was like kind of your emphasis of the keynote versus transition to what it is today and what you talk about today?
Right. Well, there's always been an overarching theme to everything I've ever done, and I didn't know it until recently when I actually was kind of forced to brand it. And it was a branding coach who was like, what have you always done? How do you describe it? And then this is what eventually came out of my mouth, which was boycott what you thought, which is now our tagline to everything. And so back then in the high school days, it was talking about, you know, the importance of taking responsibility for yourself and not blaming the rest of the world, overcoming your fears, not getting stressed out about boyfriend, girlfriend stuff, peer pressure, those kinds of topics. And then when I wrote my musicals, it was all about the decisions that we make, you know, the decisions that you make about what kind of job you choose to have, where you choose to live, the kind of person that you do choose to spend the rest of your life with. And then it moved into, with the corporate world, it was like you choose, the biggest thing I speak about is the kinds of relationships that you choose to create in the workplace. And whether or not you're going to be that person who only talks about the weather all day, or whether or not you're going to be somebody who talks about like meaningful stuff that matter to that individual. And so along the entire line, it's always been, you got to really have the courage to boycott your old way of thinking on something and be open to the idea of embracing a new perspective. And in fact, I would even say this is one of the biggest problems that we face in the world today, because we see the dividing lines between Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals, or gay and straight, black and white. And it's like people forget that we are so much more alike than we are different. And if we could just be open to someone else's perspective and not be so rigid in our thinking, that we could have such incredible results. But that's a tangent. What I mean with respect to the kind of stuff that I've been speaking about, which is like really trying to open people's minds to the idea that, I hate to say it to you, but maybe your mom and dad's ideas of what success were, maybe they just weren't the best, or they were based on what it was that they understood about life at the time that they told you. And maybe your guidance counselor wasn't the smartest individual when they told you that you should become like a speech pathologist or something. You know, it's like maybe there's more to you. Maybe there's more that you can embrace. So boycott your old way of thinking and just be okay with changing your perspective.
Yeah, and there is that through line. I can see why, you know, your branding coach. This is why branding coaches get paid the big bucks, right? Like our creative director, you know, he's my branding coach, but also he was so good that I was like, you need to do branding for all of our clients.
Right.
But they help you see through lines, and there is a very clear through line between all the things that you're doing and that perspective shift. Why boycott though? Like that's a pretty precise word to use versus just like mind shift or anything else.
Right. Great question. You know, it's, to me, I feel like our thinking in so many topics is so rigid and so conformed that you need a powerful word to really shake you out of that old paradigm. And so it's not enough to just reconsider. You, in many cases, have to absolutely boycott your old perspective on things. So an easy example would be the amount of money you think it's going to take to start a business. If you think it's going to cost $20,000, I encourage you to completely boycott that way of thinking and double it, because it almost always is in business. There's never the number we think it's going to be. If it comes down to whether or not you think you're good enough to start your own podcast and you are having all kinds of insecurities and imposter syndromes and you feel like somebody who looks like you with your amount of money can't do it, you got to absolutely boycott that. Otherwise, you will never do a good job with that podcast. I mean, if you kind of hold on to that belief system, and then but kind of hold on to a new belief system, you'll do okay. You'll have a podcast, but it won't be anywhere as good as what it will be is if you switch out of the old paradigm and move into, I can make a podcast that's going to be listened to by 1 million people a week.
That's why I like in social media just being the idea of sharing your trials and tribulations. I'm hesitant to say the word vulnerability because I think people misconstrue vulnerability with just bitching and complaining. It's not the same to me. Like if you go online and you go, man, my life is so hard because like I don't want to hear that. Like you're just looking for sympathy. However, what I really love is when people share their vulnerabilities or their trials and tribulations from a scar rather than a wound. A friend of mine said that once, and it stuck with me, and it's so true. It's like I posted this a while ago, but the trouble that I had with finding balance with some with my time with my son, for example, right? Like that is something I'm never going to get perfect, and sometimes a pendulum swing. But I talked about it from a place of, hey, this is what I'm doing now about it, and I really like. I don't know, it's a pet peeve of mine. People do it, and I'm like, God, it doesn't make sense. But I did want to ask you though too about your. I want to kind of backtrack a bit. Tell me about your start, because the thing I love about doing these podcasts is because people, when I first met my first consultant was at my old company, and he was the first person that I got inspired to be a consultant and then eventually a coach. And walking me through his start made it real, meaning I was like, oh, I could get to that level. Like, granted, like the level when I met him, he was working with people like Gucci and Lexus and Pepsi, and he's doing $1 million deals. No, he didn't. But like when he told, but again, like I was so young and I didn't understand that. Oh, there's a starting place, and he was making $2,000 a pop here and there, and he thought that was awesome. So walk me through your journey of becoming this amazing leadership executive coach.
It's really funny, guys, because I joke, but it's not a joke. I didn't want to do this. I never thought of this. Like, I actually did not want to speak or write at all. I didn't. So when I first started it, it was because I was coming out of a divorce, and I had met my wife, then my now wife, she was my girlfriend at the time, and I was really struggling. I mean, although I had a title, I was a leader at work, but coming out of that divorce, I was mentally fried, financially just buried. Like, it was just a bad time. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror. I said, look, I didn't do everything right, but I'm a good guy. And I said, a lot of people fail, because, especially in relationships, because they had nowhere good to go and no one good to do it with. So I'm shopping at the discount grocery store, and I bump into a friend that was going through a divorce. And I said, look, I'm going to get some guys together, and the whole point is for them to come and go home to their lives and relationships better. So I was already a therapist at the time. I wanted to create questions, and I wanted to be like the hair club president and the member. So I had these guys in my house, started with friends, then some strangers, and then it got weird to have strangers in your house. So we started renting space other places. And all I wanted to do, Raylen, was sit down, ask questions, and be a part of the conversation. As it went on, I started to stand up to make my point and then sit back down. And then I realized how people were responding to me standing up. And then at some point, I never sat back down. However, the business was so different. Like I said, it was, we had a men's division, a women's division, a youth division. And as impactful as it wasn't successful enough to feed my family because of how the business was. I can't compete with someone, a man or woman, getting off work and them giving me their money once a month to come to a meeting at 7:00 at night. And so it became all about how many butts were in the seat instead of the content that was given. I said, well, where are people? They're at work, they're at school, and they're on their phones. So that's where I need to be. So I went to businesses and I said, listen, this is what I want to do. Now, this is pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So all of this personal growth and relationship growth and work-life harmony, they couldn't say it out loud because it sounds rude, but they said, well, this is nice, but what does it do for us?
Yeah, of course.
And I remember sitting in that meeting and was like, you want leadership. But I don't talk about leadership. And I went home that night and I looked at my videos and my writings and I said, oh my goodness, I'm already talking about leadership. I just never said the word.
Yeah.
That day, I started adding the word leadership to my content, and then boom, it started to take off. And then I had to push the snowball up the hill.
Yeah, of course.
You know, so I started, some small businesses in the area. Hey, I like to do this. It's subscription based. I'll do it for your people for free. If they like it, they can sign up for it.
And then so you went in to the place and was like, yo, who's the leader here? Who was the CEO? Who's the manager, whatever? And you talked to those people directly. And that's how you got your first few clients?
Yep, because I was doing the old school, when you first start your business, the community networking where you're shaking hands and the 30-second commercials. So I knew some people that had small businesses. So I'd go and say, listen, I want to do this for your people. It's not going to cost you anything. Everybody starts with free work. But if they like it, it's like a subscription that they can do on their own. So they are, of course, great. Now, I learned two things. I would go in, and one, I learned that people loved what I had to say. Two, I learned that if the company wasn't paying for their subscription, they weren't going to do it.
Yeah.
Because you're talking to people that haven't done anything typically about life for themselves or professional or leadership. And then all of a sudden they're going to start now. So I learned that they liked it, but the company had to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So then I started saying to the company, say, listen, what do you want to get out of bringing someone like me in? And I stopped leading with my menu, and I started leading and learning from their needs. And now I can match it to what I have because, hey, this is what it sounds like you need. And then it also allowed me starting to customize and create things that I wasn't even thinking about. Mm-hmm. And then it just kept snowballing until what it is today. But, thank you for those first small businesses and me putting together speaking engagements when I set up 80 chairs and 3 people came.
Well, that's why I love asking, I've been fortunate. I've had a lot of coaching consultants come on here, and I love asking that question because one, there's so many people that I know that listen to this that are online entrepreneurs and they don't know what it's like cold calling somebody or walking into a business and saying, hey, I think I can help you. And so it's funny because even me at one point, it's almost, Andre, like I forgot that there's people in Arizona that could use my services. Like I just forgot because all of my, businesses that I work with are not here except for like one. That's it. And so anyway, I love hearing from other people about like how they got going. So then where did you first, what was a platform, social media platform that you really first got involved with that you started to like? Because I mean, for me right now, for example, like YouTube and podcasting is like, to me, the greatest lead generation platform ever. But that's just for me. For some people, it's LinkedIn. So what have you found that works for you?
Mine, I would have to say, is LinkedIn. And the reason is because it's easy. And what I mean by easy is when you go on Facebook, for what I do, it's not for everybody. It's consumable by everyone, but not everyone's going to support my business financially, okay? So if I go on Facebook and I make a post about leadership or put information out, all I know is your name. But on LinkedIn, I can intentionally connect with titles, chief people officers, CHROs, director of human resources. So I know my pool. I can fish in my own pond. So that has been, from a lead generation standpoint, just absolutely phenomenal. Now, here's the risk. So any entrepreneur listening, and I share with my kids, I don't believe in plan B. Mm-hmm. However, I fully believe in expanding your plan A. Okay? So I share with my team, listen, LinkedIn is our bread and butter, not to mention doing a great job with wherever you're working, they'll refer you. So referrals and LinkedIn for us works. However, if LinkedIn changes their algorithm tomorrow, which they do from time to time, and all of a sudden LinkedIn shut off tomorrow and we couldn't do that, what else would we do? Whatever the answer is to that, let's start doing. Be sure you, as a leader, are doing a bit of that other thing. So it's not plan B, you're expanding plan A.
Yeah.
And if the main bread and butter thing stops, all you got to do is put extended plan A on steroids.
Yeah.
So email marketing, which I have not delved into because I don't like receiving spam and all of that.
Yeah.
However, a lot of the world must, or it wouldn't be working.
Yeah.
So that's the
I was
great
the same
endeavor
way,
now,
honestly.
is really
Like
picking
I,
that part up.
yeah, you gotta find what works for you. Like email marketing is one of those things that, like for example, I did it because I knew I needed to do it, and I had a newsletter, and luckily I was just doing it, and then just recently, somebody that had been on my newsletter for almost a year and a half finally converted.
Yeah.
And then that's what made me think. I was like, if I didn't have this, I don't know if this person would have converted, right? And the cool thing is, and I kind of see this for you, which was similar to my newsletter, and that I have like on Tuesday, it's called a Tough Love Tuesday. And it's just advice from like, it actually comes from my YouTube channel, but we just transcribe it and we kind of package it a little bit better for email. But basically, I never pitch in my emails. But in every single email, I have a PS line that says, when you're ready, here are 3 ways we can help you. And that way, it's like whenever I actually stole this from his name's Joe Polish. He's an old school marketer. He would hate that I said he's old school, but it's okay. He is. I mean, him and his buddies like literally invented the squeeze page, the landing page. Like they're old school. Anyway, again, I just hope Joe, if you heard this, like I'm not calling you old. I love you. Anyway, but that's how he does his, is that he gives value first, always. Yes. And then the PS line is just, hey, by the way, like I don't know if this will help, but I got this thing. Right. And you would think they get used to seeing that and they would just forget about it, but they don't. Like they see it, and then every day, imagine they go, oh, I'm going to click today, maybe tomorrow. And then you just, every week, you stay patient and they convert. So I'd like that for you.
Great point. And I call it being the chicken. You called it giving value. You give great information away. So via LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever you're on, email marketing, when you give great information away, you've earned the right for that PS statement.
Yeah.
You've earned the right for the sell. And I don't even expect to sell my service. I want to sell a Zoom call. Let's get on a call. Let's get eyeball to eyeball and chat. That goes something from there, then great. Let's do something. Because I don't assume I know what you want yet, or if I can help yet. So that was really, really huge. You got to be able to be the chicken, give the value. And I love that PS at the end. So my team is starting up the email marketing. I'm finally saying yes to that, because expanding your plan A is huge. Like my son's a quarterback. I said, you win more Super Bowls than Tom Brady, you will still retire younger than I am now.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? What else are you interested in that you would do for free because you like it so much? Let's start doing that too. So when football's over, whether it's 20 minutes from now or 20 years from now, it's all a part of plan A.
And so I'm curious for you, how much of someone wanting to elevate, right, and have more money in their business, whatever, is their own like thinking of the past and how you should get there, very logical thinking, versus like they just because what I'm trying to say, Scott, I think is a lot of people think there's like A, B, C. I take this road, I get there. But if it's a road you've never been on, how the fuck you're going to get there? It doesn't mean you can't get there. It just means it's gonna. The idea's got to come from a different place. If that makes sense.
I think you have to believe that you can, right? And I will tell you, so for me, for example, I could see, even long before I thought I wanted to get into this business, doing speaking, workshops, facilitation, coaching, all that stuff, I would go in the course of the job I had to these trainings, and I would sit there and go, I can do this. I could feel it. But I never had the balls to go do it. And I was like, all right. And then through a weird set of circumstances, I had a chance to sort of try it on. And I was like, oh, this is pretty fun. Okay. And I said, so what is it I like about this? And then I would go and I started doing public seminars, and I go, what do I like about this? And then I found a better firm to go. Actually, when I was in Australia doing that job is when I found out my wife was pregnant with our daughter. She told me if I needed to freak out, I should do it when I was halfway around the world before I came home. And I was just freaking out. It was 72 hours before I was coming home, and I was bouncing off the walls for like 3 days, just couldn't wait to get home. We were that annoying couple at the Houston airport that when she came to pick me up, like she gets out of the car and I'm like, she's like got a Ziploc bag with a pregnancy test in it, and we're hugging. And I'm kissing her, like standing there. People are honking because we're blocking traffic. And I was like, she's having my baby. You know, I was like, yeah.
I did it.
And she was like, man, I wasn't sure how you were going to respond, but I think you delivered. And I was like, well, here we go. She goes, so now we have to go tell my dad. And I was like, well, I'm glad you waited till I got home to do that. So we were married at the time, but still, it was kind of funny. So we, you know, these experiences, you know, they all happen. And so like I'm in Australia and then she goes, hey, can you get off the road for a little while? And I was like, ugh. But I was like, you know, I got a baby on the way. This job's not paying me a whole lot. I got my reps in, but you know, what can I do? And so I had a client that offered me a full-time job and I went in and did it for about 2 years. Looking back, it wasn't a whole lot of money, but it allowed me to be home with my wife and our new baby and get adjusted for the first couple of years. And I was grateful for that. But I also saw how challenging it was to take the things I'd been teaching and try to implement it in a real business. And so then I went back, got hooked up with some other partners, got back out, started talking to more people, and learned that I had different perspectives because I had gone back and tried to eat my own dog food, right? I was trying to do my own work. And then, again, things got busy, and I'd sort of figured out where the cap was. Like I knew how many days a year I could be gone. I was spending, 100 plus nights a year in a hotel, and I was gone all the time. And I remember there was a week I was in I hadn't been home in 6 days. I'd been in 4 states at 3 different hotels, or 4 states and 4 different, anyway, 5 hotels in 4 states in 6 days. It was nuts. We were at the end of that week, we were at a destination wedding in Sanibel, Florida. And we were in the pool at the hotel. And my wife looked at me and she goes, look, I got to talk to you about something. I was like, no guy ever wants to hear that, right? And I was like, okay, what's up? And she said, you're never home. I'm a single working mom living in Houston during the week when you're gone. I'm in the car 12 and a half hours a week getting to and from the office, dealing with our daughter and my full-time job while you're out running around for not as much money as you think. And something's got to change or I'm going to make that change. And I said, funny you should bring that up because just this week I have a client in Tulsa, which is where my wife and I lived before we moved to Houston. A client in Tulsa wants me to come work for them full time. And they're willing to pay me what I made last year when I was on the road, but I won't have to travel. Do you want to move back to Tulsa? And I kid you not, she turned around, looked at the pool attendant, ordered another round of drinks, and gave me a kiss. Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's the right answer. And so, I, again, took things I had learned, came back in, and now my job was to train all the salespeople at this startup. And so I was dealing with we were bringing a new cohort of sales development reps every 6 weeks.
Jeez.
And, we bring them in and I was getting reps then redesigning the program and making adjustments every couple of weeks. Again, my favorite thing to do, Raylen, is to get paid to learn. Mm-hmm. So I was like, I'm going to treat this as a single client that gets all of my attention. Yeah. I did a couple other gigs on the side here and there because I could, and I could pick up some extra cash. But really, I was like, I'm happy doing this. And it was fun until it wasn't because startups are weird. But I did this, and I learned so much that when I came back out on the back end of that, I looked at my wife and I said, look, babe, I love you. My filter only works as an employee for about 2 years. Yeah. And then I start putting my consultant lens back on and I say things that need to be said that nobody wants to hear. I think this is better served for me to be a consultant. And I said, I've got enough partnerships and I've built the network and I know the people. I can fill my calendar up and I can be busy. And now I've figured out how to get paid more money. And so, again, started doing that and then got to a point where all of a sudden COVID hit. I watched $60,000 worth of business evaporate off my calendar, which at the time was about 4 or 5 months worth of work.
Yeah.
Disappeared. And nothing new was going to come in to fill it. And somehow I just pulled it all together and said, this is your chance. This is the one shot you get to build the business that you've always wanted. So figure it out. And I figured out, cobbled together some different ways to get some income. I had a couple of clients that were gracious enough to let me sort of pivot. Instead of coming on site, I would do things remote, and we figured it out. Once I finally broke the 6-figure mark in 2021, I came back in 22 and I almost doubled what I had done the year before. Mm-hmm. And here we are in 2023. It's unbelievable where things are right now and the path that I'm on and where it goes. And I'm like, what am I doing different? I'm like, the work's not that different, but I'm working smarter.
Yeah.
Because I figured out what was holding me back. Now, do I still do some things sometimes that are maybe don't pay as well and do whatever? Of course. Right? We all do. You have to do what you got to do, man. You got a nut to cover, you got a family to feed, you got stuff to do. The smartest thing I did last year was I put myself on a steady draw. So I said, here's my income. No matter how much I make, this is how much I'm pulling out every month. And I let a reserve build up so that now when these oh shit moments happen and these things happen, that like when you have those crashes, just like they do in the bike races, right? Somebody drops a water bottle, you roll over it and you have a wreck, right? Your tires touch with somebody else that goes down, there's a big wreck. You can't do anything about it. But I don't have to worry that I'm getting kicked off anybody's squad. Yeah. I don't have to worry that I can't make the mortgage payment, or take care of my family. I'm good. I got 6 months of worth of my pay in the bank, in reserve. I'm good. If I can't figure out how to pivot in 6 months, I deserve to go get a full-time job again.
I want to make sure people understand this because what I find interesting with a lot of people that listen to this show and the people I've just talked about in general, I've talked to in general, is they're going to hear in 3 years, Scott went from beginner, just starting out, to now doing numbers. And that's not the fucking story.
Years.
Like this,
it was 13
like
years.
People don't get it. Like it's the reps, and so it's like one of the things, one of the things that happened again to us is I went from idea. Now here's the thing: I'm kind of a fast starter, right? So I have an idea, we do it. So I literally the agency we started happened because I was on the phone with somebody. And I said, I didn't have the offer. I was like, hey, if I could do this, would you want to do it? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, all right, cool. I called my website girl, Elisa. I said, hey, can you get this done by the end of the day? Yes. I put the team together. We were going. Like 2 days in, we had a thing. And so we went from, again, that to multiple 6 figures in 9 months. Again, people hear that and they go, but what you don't know is, again, my old corporation, I was traveling like you every single week. We had 30 locations, and my job was to go to every location, read P&Ls, figure out who we need to coach, what's going on, who needs to get. So I was on the road,
and you're killing yourself,
dude, putting in the fucking reps. We had a call center, 120 people. I was the head coach of every single one, and once a week, or 1 week a month, I would coach every single chair and listen to every single call. Like that trainer life. So like. I put in
freaking hard,
reps.
Man. That's brutal.
Then you move forward, and again, the company's not doing all that great. And I was tired of marketing telling me that my sales team wasn't crushing, so I started learning marketing because I wanted to understand: is it really us or is it you? And so I started learning marketing. Again, and then the apprenticeship. The thing is, when I first started as a coach online, I partnered with a friend of mine who already was starting a business idea. They were like, hey, we need a mindset coach, sales coach. Cool, no problem. I did that for about a year and a half, 2 years, built a 7-figure company with them. And then the reps. So then when it was time for us to do our own thing, and that ramp up seems like, oh my God, it's not though. Like you guys don't know how much I had to fucking learn to be able to do that. And by the way, there's still tons of shit that I had to learn to go into like this year. But I think once you have a different perspective, you can see the world a little bit better. And it's funny because my credentials of being a good coach is I used to get punched in the face for a living. You know what I mean?
Right. That's what I would expect out of my coach.
But here's the thing, though. It's like there's so many through lines. Like for example, like the example I usually give, especially for our academy for the newer coaches, is I created it because I wanted to be like a gym. You go to like your MMA gym or jiu-jitsu, and what happens there? Everyone's there to get better. And you're competing every day, but the whole reason why you're competing is to help the other person. And if you personally, it becomes this like almost like team aspect of if I'm not getting better, my teammate can't get better. So with you and being a magician, what was that through line for you on being a magician and human connection? Like, where's that through line?
Yeah, and it's right back to perspective. That's why I started there. I got invited to give a TEDx talk in 2015. At that time, I was still a full-time magician. I had been enjoying a very nice career. I did the starving artist thing when I was younger, and eventually,
Sorry, I got to cut you off again. So the 10X thing, let's back up for a second. Did you pursue that, or did they come to you?
I got invited. I was not pursuing a TED or TEDx talk. I'd never even thought of it. And in 2015, it wasn't really a thing like it is now that like people were trying to get. There wasn't an industry. There weren't people like me that run companies now coaching TED speakers. You really kind of got invited and went and did your thing. And I got invited to give a TEDx talk. And back then, it like it wasn't this serious like crazy industry like it is now. They said, we heard your name in the community a bunch of times. We'd like to invite you. Would you like to give a TEDx talk? And I was like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And they were like, great. What do you think you would speak on? They asked me what I wanted to talk about. Like it was a whole different ballgame back then. And I went through the process of trying to figure out what is a topic I could speak about as a magician that would actually be useful to a general audience. Because in 2015, there were only a small handful of TED or TEDx talks that had ever been given by magicians, and I thought most of them just sucked. I thought that they were talks
typical, like what were they talking about even?
Yeah, they were talks that only magicians would care about. They were about like the beauty of wonder, the art of misdirection, and like, yeah, interesting to magicians sitting around at 1 a.m., eating Taco Bell and jamming on card tricks. But I really sat down, like, I don't want to just give a talk only magicians would care about, because I'm not that interested in magicians, to be honest. I want to give a TEDx talk that feels like it is in line with what TED actually stands for, which is ideas worth spreading. And so I played with different ideas, and the one I settled on was perspective taking. That what magicians really master is the ability to take on and fully understand the point of view of another person. Because we have to, because we know the secret. We actually can't do a magic trick from our own perspective. It doesn't work. I have to do it from your perspective. And so magicians master this, and psychologists call it perspective taking. Magicians don't know what that term is. They just do it intuitively. And so I gave a talk about how magicians learn to do it and how anyone can use the same techniques that magicians use to better their relationships, to make more meaningful connections in their personal or professional lives. And it just exploded, took off.
Why do you think it did so well? Like, what was the root of it that made people go like, man, I really need this in my life?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I've had many 8 years now to think about that, because it's not like I've ever had any other viral video. I've made 500 videos on YouTube, and one of them did a couple 100,000 views, and most of them did 10,000 or less. It's not like I've had viral success otherwise. So I think the reason is a few different things. One, it was 2015, and if you put yourself back in that time, that was right when the world was starting to feel really divisive and really disconnected for the first time. It was when the world was taking that left turn where it started to just feel like everyone was just shouting past each other, everyone was talking and no one was listening. So I think by pure luck, the topic of human connection, the title was relevant. The title was perfect. It was How to Magically Connect with Anyone. My wife came up with the title, so I have no credit for that.
Let's go.
I had like 25 possible titles. I didn't like any of them. She said, go away, leave me for 30 minutes. And I went away. I came back and she said, How to Magically Connect with Anyone. And I was like, that's the one. So the title, and then honestly, the thumbnail, which I didn't choose. TEDx, the YouTube algorithm chooses the thumbnail. TEDx doesn't even choose it. And the thumbnail the algorithm chose was a fedora-wearing magician in a suit with a goatee holding two ropes. With the title, called How to Magically Connect with Anyone. It was just like the curiosity element was there. Yeah. So it was like the right topic at the right time with the right title and the right thumbnail. It just worked perfectly.
Well, here's the part that, and it's kind of interesting to me, is in a very divisive time, you would think people don't want to connect. like right now,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if it's better or worse, the connection wise. I personally, I think it depends on your own environment. Like I happen to create a really awesome environment of dope fucking people, so I don't really see that. But you know, maybe like right now though, I don't see people trying to go across the aisle if we're talking politics. I don't really see people trying to connect. So again, like, do you feel like maybe inherently we do want to connect, or what do you think that is, or does it come from a place of like manipulation? Because I think about like 48 Laws of Power, for example, or like Robert Greene's work. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
I have the book. It's fascinating.
I love that book.
Yeah.
But again, like he wrote the book, though. I don't know if you heard him talk about it, but he wrote the book to protect others from doing so. Anyway, that's another topic. But anyway, what are your thoughts on that? Like, it's confusing because like at a very divisive time, you would think people don't care about connecting with others.
Yeah, it's the opposite, but I can totally see where that would come from. So right now, it's never been worse. So 2 out of every 3 Americans reports feeling lonely or isolated on a regular basis. 2 out of 3. I mean,
pandemic obviously made it worse.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, that statistic was pre-pandemic. So it's yeah. So that it's only been worse since then. You know, loneliness is actually considered an epidemic by Cigna, which is a health services organization, right? So, and there's all these kinds of devastating impacts that loneliness has. It's on mental and physical well-being. There's a statistic out there that people who feel lonely on a regular basis are have the same mortality rate as someone smoking, you know, whatever it is, two packs of cigarettes a day or something like that. Like it's crazy. So it's never been more lonely, more divisive. And there's people want to connect. I mean, they are desperate for someone to hear them. Most people go through their entire lives never feeling truly heard, never being listened to by another person. And that sounds exaggerated, but we mostly talk at each other.
Yeah.
And lately we mostly talk past each other, right? Very few people take a minute. I mean, and it's no surprise. We're not trained in it. We're not trained in human. You never had a class in your entire life that was here's how to connect meaningfully with another person. No class exists.
I don't think we needed to until like social media and stuff. I mean, tell me if you feel like this is fair, but we didn't need one because our entire human existence is based on the fact that we communicated, like the white in our eyes, all of it. But then something happened. I don't know when this was, but something happened when we just stopped doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to blame social media. I get worried about, I mean, it certainly made it worse. It certainly exacerbated a problem. I think it made a problem that was already there much, much more obvious, much worse. I think part of it is just that we've moved so far away from where humans came from. I mean, where, and I'm not a biologist. I'm not going to go into the biology of it, but we all kind of know that this is true. We have not evolved as fast as our technology and our society has evolved, right? We are mostly the same humans that we were like thousands of years ago, but our world has changed dramatically, way faster than we've evolved. So we are fundamentally social creatures who genuinely need each other. We need to be seen, we need to be heard, we need to be understood, and most importantly, we need to be valued. It's the number one reason people leave organizations. It's not the pay or the benefits. On most studies for years and years, people quit, people leave organizations because they don't feel valued for their contributions. And it's why we quit relationships too. It's why relationships fall apart. You know, whether they're romantic or friendly, we don't feel valued. And I think people are desperate for that. And then the pandemic collided into a loneliness epidemic and everything went to hell.